no, no, not that. People are locked into the story. And Jesus says, now this young man has sunk so low that he's out in a Gentile field, bad enough, and he's feeding an unclean animal or animals. There he is. He's gone from the heights of the honor of this son of this wealthy landowner now to the depths of feeding pigs in a Gentile land. This is the lowest you can get. Whatever you think the lowest point of a person's life could be, the people listening to this story have to say, man, he's gone so low. Notice he was longing to fill his stomach, 16, with the pods. This is from the carob tree that the swine were eating. And notice, this may tell us that no one was giving anything to him, may indicate that they wouldn't even give him the pods. That as he fed the swine, he was longing for their food. Kind of picture it as if you ever got so desperate that you'd watch a dog eat and long to eat his food. That's how hungry he was. And it may be, many commentators believe, that as he watched the pigs eat and longed for their pods, pig pods, they wouldn't even give him that. Now, we have to say, well, in the story, he's probably getting a small ration from the landowner. But remember, it's a famine, and maybe he has to wait until he's earned it. And so he's hungry, he's starving, and even pig pods look good. Have you ever come to a point in your life where you start saying to yourself, if that looks good to me, if that particular idea appeals to me, there's something else desperately wrong here. If pig pods begin to be the longing of your heart, you're in trouble. But all of a sudden, the boy who was free and covered by his father, now a slave, notice he comes to his senses, 17. When he came to his senses, the New King James says when he came to himself, but I think the NAS is better here. He came to his senses. This is a turning point now in the story. And can you remember that time in your life when you had that epiphany? When maybe you were in a distant country, maybe you were doing things that were wrong, maybe you had hit rock bottom, you were as empty could be, and all of a sudden you just had this thing smack you across the face. Like, what am I doing here? What am I doing? And notice he goes on. He says, how many of my father's hired men, these are just the day laborers who wouldn't even be considered, like servants were kind of considered part of the family, but these are the hired day laborers, have more than enough bread, but I'm dying here with hunger. Barclay says, hardship has a wonderful way of bringing people to face the facts, close quote. So there he is. He says, man, the lowest servants on my father's payroll, they have more than this. I can get some bread. I can make things right again. And I will get up and go, 18, to my father. Notice it doesn't say I will go back to the farm. It doesn't say I will go back home. True repentance is to go back to the Father through the Son, Jesus Christ. And he said to himself, I'll get up, I'll go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, notice he takes ownership now. I have sinned against who? Heaven. And in your sight. Whenever we sin, brothers and sisters, our sin is first of all vertical. Now we can sin against people, and certainly that idea is here. But first and foremost, the prodigal son, prodigal, by the way, means to waste, to go your own way and to waste what you have. That's the idea of the prodigal. He says, I have sinned against heaven. And earlier when Jesus talked about the rejoicing, he said heaven would rejoice. And heaven is representative here of the divine name or the divine person. So what does the prodigal say? I have sinned against God. And he's rehearsing a speech that he's going to give to his dad. He hasn't gone home yet. But he said, this is what I'm going to say when I get there. I'm going to take ownership of my sin. I'm going to go to my father. And when I get there, I'm going to say, I have sinned against heaven. You see, this was already bubbling in his soul. He already knew. And I take it maybe here that he had already made peace with God. Psalm 51:1, David, after the sin with Bathsheba, says, "Be gracious to me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according to the greatness of thy compassion, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against thee and thee only I have sinned and done what is evil in thy sight, so that thou art justified when thou dost speak and blameless when thou dost judge." So he says, my sin is first vertical. Have you ever been in a place in your life where you blew it and you started rehearsing what you would say to God and even to people that you've hurt? It's an uncomfortable thing. Because when you've done something wrong and you really want to own it, you realize that part of true repentance is also to try to amend what you've done. And that's uncomfortable. So the prodigal is coming to his senses, and he's going over what he would say. And he adds this, he says, "I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me as one of your hired men." I think we can all resonate with this, because we've all had times, even as Christians, where we've blown it, and then we say, you may say words very much like this: "I am no longer worthy to be called your son." Why would you bother loving someone like me? And you know, when I've had times like that as a Christian, God has, in little but amazing ways, reminded me that he loves me anyway. Not because I'm worthy, but because he decided to adopt me into his family. But there's many times, humanly speaking, where we have a hiccup during the day, or we do something stupid, or we fall into a sin, and we say to ourselves, I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy to be your child. I'm not worthy to be in this position of ministry. I'm certainly not worthy to tell anybody else about you, because look at where I am right now. We rehearse it. And we feel it. And so he says, what I'll do is I'll tell him to make me like one of those day laborers. One of those guys that shows up for the day of work and then leaves and gets paid, and tomorrow he could be dismissed, or another man could be chosen. Not a close relationship, but at least I'd be there, and maybe my Father will accept me that way. You see, our human tendency, folks, is to think that we won't be accepted. Our human tendency is to think the worst of ourselves and our sin most often, and to think, you know what, there's no way that I'm going to get a gracious reception from the Father given what I've done. I took the estate early. I dishonored him. I basically said, you guys are dead to me. I'm out of here. How will he receive me? And I'm sure the whole walk home, tattered, smelling like pigs, dirty. He went over it and over it and over it. He wondered, what is my Father going to do? But what he couldn't have expected was the response that he was about to get. He got up 20 and he came to his father, but while he was still a long way off. You know, when you've known someone a long time, they can be far away, but you just know their walk. They can be far away, but you know their mannerisms. And I would imagine the prodigal at this point is disheveled. He's not looking good, but Dad, he knows his son. And the truth of the matter is, Dad's been scanning the horizon ever since the boy left. He's been looking for him. What the son didn't know is that the whole time he was gone, I'm sure his father was praying for him, like many of you who have prodigals. I'm sure his father was scanning the horizon. And if only the son knew, he would have come much quicker. I don't know how long he had to stay, feeding the pigs. I don't know how long this all unfolded, but I know this. Had he only known his father's heart, he wouldn't have waited as long as he waited. And some of us, we do that. We put off going back to God because we think, you know what, I don't know what kind of reception I'm going to get. We often imagine God with some big, hammer just waiting to beat us down. But as he came to his father, while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. And he felt what? Compassion. The one thing that the scribes and Pharisees lacked, the Father freely gave. Compassion. He said, I desire compassion above sacrifice. Jesus looked on the multitudes with compassion. What is compassion? It's love in action. And so the Father felt compassion. He saw His Son, and He did something very unusual in this culture. Imagine a wealthy landowner running down the dirt street of a village and embracing a son that many in that community already knew that boy dishonored his father. He basically said, you guys are dead to me. He left everything, and now, look, there he is. But the father doesn't care what anybody else thinks. He runs to his son, and he embraces him. Literally, he throws his arms around him. And you must remember the backdrop. Why does he receive tax gatherers and sinners? And Jesus is revealing the Father to us. You see, the Son, John 1:18, has come. He is the exegesis of God. We talk about exegeting a passage. That means to divide it properly and bring out the proper meaning.